Hi everyone, thanks for joining. It's really great to be hosting our second episode of our LinkedIn Lives. The last one was really well received. We got a lot of feedback afterwards, which was really great. And to follow on from that, we talked about a lot at the last session to do with how to do business in the US from the UK. And as a follow on to that, what most of our clients find is that once they've successfully done that, they then start to look at a location in the US to actually base themselves. And so it seemed pretty natural that that would be the next topic that we discuss today. So I'm really excited actually because I've asked Nikki Brigati to join me today. I work with Nikki directly. She's in our US team and she is our VP of Client Engagement and knows everything you need to know about doing business in the US. So Nikki, thank you so much for joining me. It's great to see you on the screen.
Amy, thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be joining everyone today live from New York.
I know, yeah. And it's pretty early there. What time are we there?
Just about 7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you for getting up early and joining us, probably before you've even had breakfast. We appreciate it. Well, it's lunchtime here in the UK, which is why we picked this time so people can just eat a sandwich at the desk whilst they're listening in or watch it back at their own convenience. So let's get started because we've actually got a lot of content to get through over the next 30 minutes. So basically what we're going to go through is we're going to talk about what are some of the factors that you need to consider when choosing a state in the US to base yourself in. And we'll just broadly talk about some of those factors. And then we're going to get into the meat and bones of the session where we talk about what are the most established states in the US for doing business. So we've got three, and it's probably no surprise what three we're going to talk about. We're going to go through kind of what's the economy looking like there, the current market, health, and then we'll talk about what are the tax burdens or incentives that you might pay there, a little bit on the population, and then other, general points of note that either we know about from our experience in working in those states or our clients who've had success in those states have shared with us, and they are mainly recruitment clients. And then we're going to come on to, which probably be my favourite part of today's session, is the states that we've witnessed the biggest growth in over the last year. So these are what we call the up and coming states. I call them the cool states because these are the places where I think recruitment pioneers are going and putting a flag in the ground and creating markets in these phenomenal states. And we're going to tell you a little bit about why they're going to those states. And again, we'll cover off the economy, market, taxes, and any other key points of note. And at the end, we'll just do a quick recap. So put your seatbelts on because we're about to take you on a whistle-stop tour of the top states in the US to do business. So before we jump into those established states, just want to cover off really what are some of the factors that people think about when they actually think about picking a state where they might be located. Now, first of all, some people actually will say, well, why do I need to pick a state? I'm just expanding to the US. And I always try to say to clients that say it like that is, saying you're going to the US would be the equivalent of you saying you're going to take your recruitment business to Europe because you're dealing with a whole continent. It's absolutely huge. So when you think about the US, what we typically try to say, and if you watch the previous episode, you'll have heard us talk about this, is that you need to consider the 50 states as if they're 50 different countries because they've all got their own economy and their own unique culture and their own tax and legislation systems as well. And so that's why it's super important to think about a specific state to do business in. So when you come to make that decision about which state you're going to choose, some of the factors really to consider are what are the tax elements that you need to think about in that state, such as corporation tax, such as income tax for your employees. And also when you think about your employees, what's the employment law like? What are some of the burdens that you may need to think about when it comes to your internal recruiters, but also when it comes to, if you do contract recruitment, when it comes to contractors. You're going to want to think about your budget and therefore look at things like the typical office costs in each of those states and also the cost of living. And that's particularly important if you're looking at relocating some of your UK recruiters over to the US. What's the cost of living and the lifestyle like for those recruiters because you want it to be attractive for them. Also, and probably most important, is just thinking about where's your target audience based. where's the largest concentration of the type of clients you are looking for based, because it may be that that could be your starting point. And then what's your competition in those states? Is it saturated? Is it unsaturated? And having a think about how successful you might be if you're shoulder to shoulder with competitors who offer a very similar proposition that might push you into more of a pricing territory than really being able to, a value add territory. So there's some of the factors that are important when considering a state, and I have literally breezed over those points. I could probably talk for an hour on each of those with you, but it's just kind of to lay the land and to set the context of what you to consider as we go through each of the states we're going to talk about today. So next we want to talk about, and we'll spend a little bit of time here now in these next two sections, but we're going to talk about the established US states for business. And so we're going to go through three. We'll go through them one by one. I will introduce each state, just talking a little bit about the economy of that state and how healthy it is as a market. And then Nikki, where we're going to bring Nikki in as our expert, is going to start to really talk about what are the taxes like in that state that you'd need to think about if you're a business founder that could impact you? What's the population like in terms of its workforce and talent to be able to fill positions, not only for you, but for your clients as well? And then any other points to note Nikki's going to cover and share with you some of our insights of our experience, but also, and I would say more importantly, some of the experience of our clients who are recruiters and who have had success in some of these states. So, with our resident New Yorker on today's session, and any New Yorker you'll meet is very passionate about the state of New York. So it makes complete sense that we would start with Nikki on talking about New York. So let me just paint the picture in terms of New York as a state for doing business in. So the Big Apple, as most of us call it, comes with a big economy. The GDP of New York last year amounted to $1.5 trillion, which actually just blows my mind. That's one state in the US generating $1.5 trillion worth of GDP. And actually, if New York were a nation, a country, it would rank globally as the 10th largest economy. It would be the 10th largest country for GDP globally. Again, some of these stats kind of blow my mind. That economic ranking as the 10th largest global economy is higher than Australia, Ireland, and the United Arab Emirates. So it's definitely huge when you look at it in isolation, and probably feeds quite nicely into what I was saying earlier about considering the size of the US and considering that state-by-state strategy. New York's also home to many of the world's largest companies, and it actually has 51 Fortune 500 companies headquartered in the state too. So it's got a lot of business based in the state. And the city has a significant worldwide influence on almost every industry, with the standout industries being tech, finance, media, politics, and fashion. Which is probably no surprise to many of you listening. So Nikki, it'd be really great to hear from you now. Just a little bit about the taxes in the state and what founders may need to consider when thinking about doing business or being located or headquartered in New York.
Yeah, I think New York obviously is a very popular state that we see a lot of our clients expanding to when they first come to the US. But there are some disadvantages to starting out your business in New York as well, primarily from a tax perspective, because New York is ranked one of the worst states in terms of tax burdens. We see pretty high income tax rates for individuals that are employed in the state of New York, between 4% and nearly 11%, and a very high corporate income tax rate as well, which is between 6.5% and 7.25%. New York as a state also has fairly high sales tax, with it being even higher in New York City. So that's something to consider as well, that the state as a whole has tax disadvantages, and then New York is a little bit more expensive to do business in as well as a city.
Yeah. And those state taxes, just for everyone's benefit, they're on top of any federal taxes that would have to be paid. Tell us a little bit then about the population.
Yes, I think one of the really great things about New York is there is a really wonderfully diverse population and a really highly skilled population. So we do see that immigrants make up over 28% of the workforce in
Wow.
New York, which is phenomenal. And we
Mm,
also do see that it is a really highly educated workforce with
yeah.
about 3 million of the population in New York, of New York's nearly 9 million, holding advanced college degrees.
Wow. So there's a lot of talent there then.
A lot of talent, a lot of competition, and a lot of talent.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And anything else that you've seen, really? Obviously, you're a New Yorker based on your experience specifically, and also what our clients have told you.
Yeah, I think there's still tons of opportunity in New York because
Yeah,
there's such a diverse like swath of different businesses like Amy mentioned. There's huge numbers of thriving businesses across the whole city. And on top of that, just the volume of business is so vast in New York. Another thing that makes it really attractive for companies when they expand to the US to start in New York is because of the short time zone difference between
mhm,
New York and the
yeah,
UK. So there's only about a 5 hour time difference. I think a couple weeks of year, it's only a 4 hour time difference based on daylight savings. And it's still a relatively short flight to go from the UK to New York. So it does make it a really common state to still kind of be the first port of call when a
yeah,
company is expanding to the US.
yeah. Perfect. And obviously, just the culture in New York. Tell us a little bit about that, about doing business from a cultural perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think like New York's vibrant. It has kind of everything that you would want. So you can really like incentivize people just by kind of saying like the opportunity is New York.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm speaking a little bit from a biased perspective, but I think really in New York, it's really important to kind of just be straight to the point and really
Mm,
just be kind of direct with doing business because
yeah.
New York is definitely very time centric.
Yeah, that's definitely the feedback I've heard as well. It's like,
Yeah,
don't beat around the bush, just tell them what you're selling, get straight to it, and
straight
get
to
the
the
deal
point.
done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they ain't got time for small talk like what we do in the UK. Great. Okay, well, let's move on then to arguably one of the most popular, and this is right over. So Nikki spoke about, the advantage and the benefit is that New York's on the East Coast. It's got great transportation links, and it's a relatively short flight, and obviously time zone when you're working with clients in the US can make a big difference. But over on the West Coast, we have got California. Now it's funny because since working at PGC, I now call it Cali. I start talking like Americans. But California is the largest state economy, and it represents 15% of overall GDP in the US. So it is the largest state in terms of economy to do business. And last year generated 3.36 trillion in GDP, which again just blows my mind. Now, if you think we spoke about New York, that's 1.5 trillion, so it's more than double the size of New York. And it's kind of mind blowing the size of the economy, but it's what makes Cali or California still a top of the list destination. And we'll come on to that in terms of the culture and the vibe that you get in California. And if we think about specifically Silicon Valley, it's arguably the most famous tech hub in the world. So those figures and why it's the largest kind of makes sense. However, as attractive as California is, it does come with its challenges, doesn't it, Nikki?
Oh, yeah. I think California by far is one of the strictest and most employee friendly states in the
Mm-hmm.
country. So, when thinking about expanding, you're also going to want to think kind of about like the impact to the business as a whole. And although California has a lot of attractive qualities, we do kind of say California, because of its complex nature, might not be the first place that you would want to expand to when looking
Mm-hmm.
at a location in the US.
Yeah. And what do kind of the taxes look like? I know that's one of the reasons. I mean, we call California the diva state, which is a little bit unfair, but it's just because there's so many taxes to consider and so many regulations, got a lot of local governments within the state as well. So tell us a little bit about the tax burdens.
Yeah, again, like New York, the taxes are fairly high from an income perspective for the employee and also from a corporate tax perspective. So the state taxes alone in terms of income tax can be up to nearly 13.5%. from an employee perspective, and from a corporate perspective, it's nearing 9%. So it is also, like New York, one of the most tax heavy states in the country.
Yeah, okay, brill. And then the kind of populations in terms of talent there, what do you typically see in California?
Yeah, I mean, California is a massive state. There's nearly 40 million people in the state. So that means that there is, again, a really wide and vast talent pool.
40 million.
Yeah. And we do see that people are, again, like very highly skilled professionals working a lot in tech. A lot of our clients that look into life science and biotech are also really drawn to California because of the nature of the universities that are there. And we do also see that California businesses receive the largest percentage of investments from venture capital companies
Okay.
out of anywhere else in the country. And that lends to what Amy said, that it is considered still a massive tech hub,
Yeah.
especially out of Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Anything else then, just in terms of like culturally in California, why people do opt for it versus why, some people have actually moved out of California?
Yeah, I mean, I think California definitely has a little bit more of that laid back lifestyle. So I think versus New York, where you kind of see like everybody's fast paced and bustling and really just kind of, hustling in the city, we see California definitely as being a little bit more laid back. You get like a nice mix of being in a city, but also there's the beautiful beaches. And
Yeah.
I think everybody really just does kind of like that lifestyle, especially from like a climate perspective. California weather is lovely.
Yeah. It's just very far away from the UK,
Very
but
far away. Yeah.
yeah, but it definitely is attractive, certainly for lifestyle anyway. I know a lot of recruiters who've gone over there. They talk about cost of living. I was talking to a client the other day and he was telling me just, go into the supermarket and just telling me about the certain cost of things compared with the UK. And we were laughing about it. But he said, the lifestyle that he has now, him and his partner, is just, phenomenal. He's never been kind of had a better lifestyle than what he's got right now. So kind of pay for that lifestyle, don't you?
Yeah. I think it's funny too, because other like people who I speak to who have kind of moved over to the US, they definitely talk about cost of living, but then also choice. Like a lot of people will say to me, like, oh, I've never been to a grocery store and there's like 10 different brands of toothpaste. So it's like you get kind of the mix of both worlds of it.
Yeah, that is so true, Nikki. Every trip I've done to the US, I know you always laugh at me because I'm like, yeah, we'll be ordering lunch. I'll be like, yeah, I'll just have a chicken salad. And they're like, okay, well, what size? What type of leaf? What extra do you want in it? What salt?
What
And it's like,
dressing do you want
this
on
is like
it?
way too much choice. I actually feel overwhelmed every time I try to order food. So yeah, I totally agree with that point there. Okay. Can't believe the time already. We're probably going to have to speed up a little bit here. But this next state we're going to talk about, 12 to 18 months ago was kind of one of our upcoming states. And now it's completely established itself alongside New York and California. And that's the state of Texas, which many, many clients have spoken to us about. We at PGC, we relocated our headquarters to Texas early last year, and we're now based out of there as well, while still retaining an ops hub in New York where Nikki is. But there's lots of reasons why companies have migrated to Texas. A lot of those tech companies have moved out of Cali and into Texas, and we've seen some major names. So Texas has definitely established itself now as one of the most popular states to do business. It's the second highest state for tech employment in the US, so you get a lot of tech candidates here. In fact, last year it had more tech jobs added than any other state in the year. The leading tech cities in Texas are Dallas, Austin, Houston, and San Antonio. And the GDP of Texas last year was 1.99 trillion. So it actually overtook New York, which is crazy. Kind of the market in Texas alone, just to put this in context, is bigger than South Korea in terms of GDP. And very, very recently, and we announced this on our socials, that Texas had overtaken New York for top 500 Fortune companies located there. So you'll remember at the beginning of the session, I said there was 51 in New York. Texas is now at 53. Now, we've done lots of content and lots of sessions on Texas, so we're going to whiz through this one. But Nikki, just tell us a little bit about the taxes, the population, and then any other items of note before we move into our growing states.
Yeah, so I think one of the most attractive things about Texas is the fact that there is no state income taxes and there's no corporate income taxes.
Crazy.
So it makes it be really, really advantageous for business to kind of start by setting up there. You kind of get a little
Yeah.
bit of a leg up, and it also creates a really, really high quality of life if you're sending out team members to work from
Mm.
Texas as well. Like Amy said, Texas has actually overtaken New York in terms of the number of Fortune 500 companies. It's actually overtaken New York in the terms of employees from our own internal data as well. And now
Mhm.
Texas is the second most onboarded state that we have behind California.
Mhm.
So, Texas, I would say, not up and coming. It is here and it has really cemented itself as an important state to keep an eye on when you're doing business. Some of the really important things to think about Texas as well is that it is really large. Like Amy said, it's nearly three times the size of the UK. If it was its own country, it would be a massive country. And
Mm.
that means that there's also a really, really large talent pool, especially in terms of tech, in terms of IT, in terms of all of those industries. And it's also home to over 170 colleges and universities. So there's a really, really strong university pipeline coming
Yeah.
out of the colleges there.
Yeah, which we know a lot of recruiters have had success with kind of taking graduates into recruitment consultant roles and having success with being able to scale teams up quickly. So that's definitely an important point to note. Right, I can't believe the time. We really need to get a wriggle on now. So we were going to talk about for a little while about why businesses are leaving these traditional states. But I'm going to whiz through these points because I think some of them are fairly obvious. Obviously, after COVID, there's been a rise in remote work, and so it's caused businesses to kind of look at the structure of their companies and decide what they want to change. State taxes as well. Nikki's just spoke about Texas. You can see how that has overtaken New York in a lot of the metrics, and one of the reasons for that is because people are just incentivized by the zero income tax on or corporate income tax as well. But there are other states that are also offering tax incentives that have made them super attractive for companies to be headquartered there. Also, you'll probably have noticed when me and Nikki were talking there about California and New York that some of those states, as attractive as they are, they're not quite friendly to do business in and they can harm your business financially. And so, again, that's another reason why we've seen businesses leave those traditional states. And it's why we've seen a real surge in companies expanding and establishing themselves in states that we wouldn't really have spoken about, a few years ago. But now we're seeing some of these states kind of chasing Texas's tail for a place to do business. So the three states we're going to give you a whistle stop tour through now are Florida, North Carolina, and Colorado. Colorado being my personal favourite for one of the upcoming states. So, firstly, Florida, the Sunshine State. If it was a country, it'd be the 17th largest economy in the world. Miami is one of the fastest growing tech hubs, and there's some major industries that are located in this state, such as aerospace, fintech, manufacturing, and life sciences. GDP $1.2 trillion, and the state is bigger than the Netherlands that produced just over $1 trillion last year. So, Nikki, really quickly, because I'm a bit worried about time now, what about the taxes and the population and other things to note on Florida?
Yeah, so Florida is definitely really attractive from a tax perspective, having fairly low corporate tax rates and also no individual income tax for your employees. It's the third largest state in the US. So behind California and Texas, you have Florida, which means that again, there's really large population density and really
Yeah.
large ability to find attractive candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Miami has seen a 15% increase in population
Wow.
alone since 2021. And what we've seen is a lot of the financial and Wall Street companies from New York relocating to Miami during the last couple of years. And I think part of the reason for that, beyond just the tax incentives, is really the high quality of life. Like Amy said, it's a sunshine state. It has a really tropical climate, great lifestyle, and more days of sunshine a year than days of not sunshine. So it's definitely a good mood booster.
I was going to say it's definitely a happy state. And then North
Yeah.
Carolina. North Carolina, we've seen a lot of movement there. Obviously, the famous research triangle, I think's really anchored that, with Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. And located at the centre are kind of three tier one research universities. So there's a lot of tech talent in North Carolina, which has made it so attractive. And it's got one of the largest tech and life sciences hubs in the US. Apple actually pledged for North Carolina that they would add those 3,000 jobs to Raleigh alone by the end of 2026. And they're also looking to invest $1 billion in the state, which is just crazy, and just shows kind of the progressive tech hub that's forming in North Carolina. GDP last year, $654 billion. We're going in the billions now from trillions, and it's crazy because billions are still huge, but compared to the trillions, it's slightly on the smaller side. So Nikki, tell us about, again, just taxes and the general landscape that clients might expect or might want to think about with North Carolina.
Yeah, so really interestingly, as an incentive, North Carolina's actually decreased their income tax.
Okay.
That's really rare. We don't see taxes typically go down in the US.
Yeah.
So I think that was a huge push and a huge incentive to get people to move into the state. So
Mm-hmm.
it decreased from 5.25% to 4.99. And corporate income taxes is also still very low. Like Amy said, there is the very famous research triangle in North Carolina, which again means that there's a really strong university to workforce pipeline. And more than 42% of the population in the state is college educated. So you have a very highly educated
Yeah.
workforce. North Carolina, we're definitely seeing as a location where a lot of our clients are opening secondary offices. And I think
Yeah.
a big piece of that is that it's geographically a really, really cool state because you have beaches and kind of that seaside lifestyle, but miles from that, you have the gorgeous Smoky Mountains as well.
Yeah.
So you kind of get like a best of all the world's
Yeah.
lifestyle in terms of like health and in terms of like beautiful scenery as well.
Brilliant. I mean, we are rushing through these states. So if anyone does want to have a real, deeper conversation about any of these states, you can reach out to me and Nikki. But to wrap up today's session, we're just going to finish talking about Colorado, which I mentioned before is one of my favorite upcoming states for lots of different reasons. But one of the most popular areas here is Denver. It's really branched out in this last year as a hub for aerospace, life sciences, and tech. And it's made it, some of the taxes and some of the other reasons we're going to look at as a really attractive state for startups. We've just seen a few international companies move into Denver. So you've got Gymshark, Salesforce, and Zoom. And really, their GDP has grown. And this last year, they were at 366 billion. So, Nikki, again, whistle stop tour of Colorado. Tell us about this state.
Yeah, I think Colorado also from a tax perspective is still fairly advantageous. It's not as low as some of the other states, but it's coming in a little bit over 4.5% for both individual income tax in the state as well as corporate taxes. So
Yeah.
that's still pretty low. It's also growing tremendously in population, especially Denver as a city. Denver's now become the 19th most populous city in the country. And
Yeah.
it is a pretty youthful state as well, with the median
Okay.
age at 35 years old. I think one of the things that makes Denver especially really, really attractive is that it's pretty centrally located within the country. So if you have offices on the East Coast or on the West Coast, you
Yeah.
can kind of travel between them pretty
Yeah.
easily and pretty quickly. I think the Denver airport is considered one of the largest airports in the world.
Wow. Okay. So it's got good transportation links. Well, we've
Yeah.
got 30 seconds left. So thank you, Nikki, so much for sharing your insights. Again, like I said, if you do want any more information, just reach out directly to me, Nikki, or Maria and Will on LinkedIn, who were on the last session, and we can do an in-depth state session with you. But for now, we're just going to pop a link to a blog, which you can check out again about the best state to do business in the US. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Again, just reach out if you need anything. And thank you so much, Nikki, for getting up early to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really great fun. So thanks everyone for joining as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone.